Today we're going to be taking a look at What Do You Meme's live stream he did with Mike Lacona and David Wood.
Mike Lacona actually wrote this book, which you guys have heard me recommend probably on live streams. It's The Resurrection of Jesus, and in this book it's a massive beast, right? And this book is awesome though, because what I really liked about it, if you're looking for like an objective perspective too, on like somebody is trying to be as unbiased as possible and evaluating like most of the, I guess some of the direct data. I can't remember how you qualify it, relating to Jesus in the first century. And that book is like, it's the best that I know of as far as that.
Oh, I wonder what kind of objective look at the resurrection that a Christian apologist did. Considering that Mike Lacona is still a Christian, I'm guessing this objective look wasn't so objective.
You know, when Gary Habermas and I were finishing up our book, The Case for the Resurrection of Jesus, we were almost done in 2002. And at that time, I remember asking him, I said, Doc, why is it you've got this bibliography, which I think it had 22 or 2,400 sources. Now it's about 3,500, maybe even more. 2,400 sources at that point, written by scholars from 1975 up until that present day, which again was around, I think it was 2002.
Exactly how many books have been written on the resurrection that say the exact same shit? Sure, they could solely analyze on one particular portion of the resurrection or of Jesus in general, but it seems like all of these guys have their own particular book that argues the exact same arguments for the resurrection. Also, just because you found a lot of people that agree with your conclusion does not mean that your conclusion is correct. This is just an ad populum fallacy because he's sitting there like, well, all of these people agree with my conclusion, therefore I'm well supported and I am correct. No, you're not. This type of argument reminds me of the apologetic about how the Bible's been copied and transcribed so many times in history and how we have so many thousands of copies of the Bible that inherently makes the Bible true. I don't really care how many copies something has or how important the book is to one particular group or another. It doesn't speak to the truth of what's in the book. Now, Lacona goes on to discuss his conversation with Gary Habermas about the current state of New Testament studies.
And he said, well, you've got a few philosophers, but most are New Testament scholars. And I thought, well, are there any professional historians, general historians who, they're trained in how to do historical investigations? Are there any who have done, an investigation of the resurrection? He said, yeah, there's a handful, but they're journal articles and very small books, but nobody's done an exhaustive one. So I thought, wow, I'd like to do that.
For one thing, Mike Lacona is not a historian. He has a bachelor's in music performance, specializing in the saxophone, a master's in religious studies, which he got at Liberty University, and a PhD in New Testament studies. I'm not sure if he started off going for a general history degree, but he definitely did not end up in a general history degree. Where he actually ended up was the circle jerk that is New Testament studies. As recalled by Lacona, Gary Habermas states that the current field of New Testament studies is filled with people that are not general historians. They are definitely not taking a look at the evidence objectively, and they are not applying the same historical methods that are used in other fields of history. One of the most common things I face with my position as a mythicist is how many teaching historians support my particular ideas or positions. It's kind of hard to have anybody in the New Testament studies field back up what you're saying as a mythicist when the entire field is primarily made up of people that have to believe in a resurrection and have to believe in a historical Jesus as part of their deeply held religious belief. And oftentimes it's mandated by the institutions that they are teaching at. If you want to be honest, the state of New Testament studies is a big circle jerk of Christians.
I had been plagued with doubts over the years, and I thought, well, I want to do an investigation. I entered this with the objective of proving the resurrection of Jesus. So I know I already have my biases, right?
And that's where you fucked up, Mike. You fucked it up! You see, you came to the investigation looking to prove your hypothesis. That's not how you should investigate your hypothesis. You see, using that, you only find things that support your idea. Anything that could possibly disprove your idea is either not going to be considered or is just going to be pushed to the side as if it doesn't matter. This is because you're only looking for things that confirm your current position. When you test your hypothesis, you want to try to find things that will disprove it. This is because you can have a lot of evidence to support your hypothesis, but it only takes one piece of evidence to disprove your hypothesis.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm going to do an objective investigation and prove that God exists or prove that he doesn't exist. Well, you're already showing your biases that rather than just seeking to see, does God exist or did Jesus rise from the dead? And so I realized that I had my own biases and they certainly threatened the integrity of my investigation.
I'm glad that you recognize this, Mike. But ultimately, you let your Christian bias poison your investigation. Yes, we all do have our own biases. But that's why peer review exists, and that's also why you try to find things that will break your hypothesis instead of trying to confirm your hypothesis. If it can be broken, then you need to rework your hypothesis so that it can actually explain everything that it's supposed to. A good hypothesis will hold up to scrutiny. Mike continues on to talk about how this investigation really made him struggle with his faith. Luckily, he had his Christian apologist friends to tether him to the Christian dogma, which ultimately poisons his conclusion.
But I was really struggling with this, and I wanted to do an investigation to say, hey, if we applied strictly controlled historical method, what would an investigation of Jesus' resurrection look like? And I could live with it if historical investigation turned up, inconclusive. But I couldn't remain a Christian if historical investigation pointed away from Jesus' resurrection. So, yeah, it took a while, but it was heart-wrenching. It was one of the toughest things I've done in my life, but very rewarding.
I'm sure that it was really hard for you, Mike. And it really does seem like you got close to taking off those Christian-colored lenses and taking an actual objective look at the evidence. But you managed to retain your bias and actually lean harder into it as you were investigating the case for the resurrection. As we will see, his Christian bias infects his arguments and investigation so much, it causes him to say things that no historian would say. It causes him to apply criteria that is only seen in New Testament studies. He stays firmly planted in his Christian dogma the entire investigation.